in your mind, what is the greatest threat to national security?
Well, I would say that as we look at the time horizon associated with threats, the greatest immediate threat to the United States and to the world is the threat posed by the rogue regime in North Korea and his continued efforts to develop a long-range nuclear capability. And so it's immensely important that we work together with all of our allies, partners, everyone internationally, to convince Kim Jong-un that the continued pursuit of these capabilities is a dead end for him and his regime.
So let me get a little specific on North Korea. We're being told that the ICBM, the most recent launch, broke up on re-entry. Is North Korea having trouble on that re-entry step, and thereby right now the U.S. overall is not at threat from their ballistic missiles?
Well, it'll take some time to assess each of these missile launches, but what is clear is that every time he conducts a missile launch and nuclear test, he gets better. And whether it's a success or failure isn't as important as understanding that over the years, he's been learning from failures, improving, and thereby increasing his threat to all of us.
So has the potential of war with North Korea increased since this latest launch?
I think it's increasing every day, which means that we're in a race, really. We're in a race to be able to solve this problem, not just us, right, but the United States, all of our allies and partners. As we know, China has tremendous coercive economic power over North Korea. I mean, you can't shoot a missile without fuel, right? And so there are ways to address this problem short of armed conflict, but it is a race because he's getting closer and closer, and there's not much time left.
So is China serious about averting this conflict? I mean, are they slow walking this?
Well, you know, the initial indications were very positive. The president, as you know, very early in his presidency, met with President Xi in Mar-a-Lago. And there were some very significant results from that initial discussion about North Korea that I think represented dramatic changes potentially in China's, not only their attitude toward the problem, but also the actions that they could take. The first of these is that China agreed that this is a threat to everyone. This is a global threat. This is a threat to China. Remember, in the past, the old language would be, well, this is really a problem between the United States and North Korea. The second big change is that China was wholly committed, and President Xi affirmed this again during President Trump's recent visit to Beijing, is that China is committed to the complete denuclearization of North Korea. And remember, in the past, and still sometimes even today, you see a lapse back into the language of freeze for freeze or suspension for suspension. That's not the objective. Negotiations for negotiation's sake, not the objective. The objective is denuclearization. And that's a big shift as well. And the third big shift is China recognizes that it does have tremendous coercive economic power over North Korea. So we're asking China not to do us or anybody a favor. We're asking China to act in China's interest, as they should. And we believe increasingly that it's in China's urgent interests to do more beyond UN Security Council resolutions. As we know, we cannot rely on an international body because there are those within that body who obstruct that important work. For example, I mean, Russia just vetoed the joint investigative mechanism for the use of chemical weapons in Syria to provide more cover for the Assad regime to potentially commit further mass murder. We know that getting the sanctions that we need 100% cut off, I think, would be appropriate at this point. The president believes that of oil and fuel to North Korea may be impossible from a UN Security Council resolution, but that doesn't constrain China or any other nation from taking the bilateral actions that they can take above and beyond that.
Well, China just sent an envoy to North Korea. Does that mean that envoy failed, that they had this launch?
Well, as you know, Kim Jong-un isn't particularly cordial to anyone, right? And even his own people. And so I don't think it came as a surprise to Chinese leadership that this envoy was rejected and was not didn't even have a meeting with Kim Jong-un. And so, the prospects now for any dramatic change in his behavior without some significant new actions in the form of much more severe sanctions, complete enforcement of the sanctions that are in place now, I think it's extremely unlikely for us to. He's not going to have a Grinch moment, I don't think, with his heart grows 2 sizes larger, and we see him change his behavior.
I didn't think we were going to get a Grinch reference. That's pretty good. This close to Christmas. A couple more things about North Korea, and we'll move around the world, if you would. Understanding that diplomacy is the preference here, obviously. Understanding that there are many military plans and options, there always are, for North Korea. Is there any military option that does not include the death of tens of thousands of South Koreans?
Well, we know for sure that this is what Kim Jong-un has done, right? Since 1950, right? Is held the population of South Korea hostage, right? Every provocation, every hostile act has originated from the North. He has in the past been able to do that, obviously with large conventional capability, all these artillery pieces and rockets and so forth that exist not too far north of Seoul.
Hundreds of them.
So, right, thousands of munitions and so forth. And so there's no military course of action that comes without risk. And that's why our alliance with South Korea, with Japan, those alliances are stronger than ever. What Kim Jong-un is doing is driving us closer and closer together and coalescing the international community against Kim Jong-un. If you think about what's happened just in recent months, and I think this ought to be something maybe we ought to provide a roll-up of, but countries across the globe have taken action beyond UN Security Council resolutions. First of all, South Korea and Japan are improving their defense capabilities at breakneck speed, and they're doing that in cooperation with us. We're doing that through joint bilateral exercises and multilateral exercises in Korea and elsewhere. But also we're doing it with improved defense capabilities. But what's been striking, I think, is how many nations have expelled North Korean diplomats who have ceased all economic relations with North Korea. This is from the Philippines to Thailand to Vietnam to Sudan to Brazil to Mexico. I mean, so many examples of countries who are acting beyond the UN Security Council resolutions and supporting all of our efforts to convince Kim Jong-un that this is a dead end, diplomatically and economically.